Access to the information and materials contained in this podcast is at your own risk. The information contained is presented for the purpose of educating the consumer on a variety of wellness and healthcare topics. The information. Nothing contained is intended to be instructional for medical diagnosis or treatment. The information contained is compiled from a variety of sources. The information should not be considered complete and exhaustive and should not be in place of a visit or consultation with your own primary care doctor. Welcome to the Concierge Doc Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Jason Littleton, CEO and founder of Littleton Concierge Medicine. Welcome to the podcast. My next guest is the creator and host of the internationally syndicated medical lifestyle television show, Ask Dr. Nandi. He's the chief health editor of WXYZ ABC Detroit, a practicing physician, and also a renowned international speaker. His appearances include TEDx, college commencements, numerous charity functions, and premier medical meetings such as Digestive Disease Week. He's delivered keynote speeches for esteemed organizations like Medtronic, Phantom Pharmaceuticals, and Eli Lilly, showcasing his expertise and passion for advancing medical knowledge and patient care. He has partnered with the Ministry of Health in Jamaica and India and collaborated with the World Health Organization. He delivers passionate and inspiring talks to diverse audiences and continues to travel to international conferences and symposia, meetings with global health leaders on his quest to improve healthcare quality and access and advocacy. His mission, to be your own health hero, is at the heart of his work, and he empowers individuals worldwide to take charge of their own health. And also recently releasing a book, Heal Your Gut, Save Your Brain. Everyone welcome Dr. Partha Nandi to the show. Welcome to the show, Dr. Nandi.
Dr. Littleton, and I go way back. Thank you for having me. It's such an honor to be with you. Your work is incredible. I follow it, and thank you for all you do every day for your patients and really, I think, the nation. You know, I remember, when we first met, you're America's energy doctor, and it continues to amaze me what you do. So thank you for having me on.
Well, thank you for being on. I mean, it's an honor to have you on. I mean, you're like the world's leader when it comes to gut health, and I'm really excited about your new release, your new book, Heal Your Gut, Save Your Brain. I've got a lot of questions because I think that when I think about the gut-brain connection, a lot of people don't understand it like they should, because if we did, we'd have better brain health, we'd have better gut health. And I'm just so happy to have you on so that I could ask you questions so you could further explain and educate people everywhere. Again, you know, you're just so esteemed, you're so celebrated, and it's, like I said, it's an honor to have you on the show. And I want you to talk to us today about your new book.
Yeah, you know, it's called Heal Your Gut, Save Your Brain. You know, as a gastroenterologist, you know, I've seen the connections through the years. I'll go back, you know, and when we've, you know, Jason and I go way back. It's even over a decade. I go back to the time when my dad had a stroke. My dad was my first hero, and this guy was very healthy. Never went to the doctor to for any ailments. He'd always go for preventative health. Never been hospitalized. My dad one day suddenly had a stroke. Not just a stroke, a devastating stroke that took away the last decade of his life, Dr. Littleton. And when he had that, it changed my perspective. I thought I was a pretty good doc. I thought I was empathetic. But then when I became the caregiver, when I became the patient, I realized that we didn't know so much that we thought we did as a physician. So I learned the other side of medicine, and that really started my quest, as you talked about, to be your own health hero, to advocate for not only preventing diseases, but also when you have the diseases, what to do with it, and really making your health your priority. So when my dad had a stroke, my family and I corralled, we rallied around him, and we did every single workup to try to find out what was going on. And the answer to everybody was, well, he just had a stroke. We couldn't find a cardiac etiology and any other etiology that he would have, no real cause. And so I was always disappointed that we couldn't find something that we could say, hey, you know what? If we had done this, we could have prevented this devastating stroke. And then fast forward a decade, we've had so much research that's developed Dr. Littleton, in the gut-brain axis. What I mean is that now we know, as you talked about, that the gut and the brain are intricate, meaning that they connect themselves in multiple ways. So the gut and the brain, we know, has a direct connection. I call it the kind of the superhighway of information, the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve, the longest nerve in your body, connects the brain to the gut. And so they're constantly talking to each other. I mean, they're basically sending messages right now as we're speaking, saying the gut's sending messages to the brain saying, hey, things are okay, and vice versa. So the gut actually sends messages and gives the brain the ability to understand, hey, that what the environment there is suitable. So if you think, we have so many sayings, right? I've got butterflies in my stomach. I have a gut feeling. These are sayings that we've talked about. When you get nervous or you're feeling uneasy, sometimes you feel it in your gut, and vice versa. If your gut is not healthy, you can't sustain great mental acuity or activity. So the first way we're connected with the brain and the gut is this information highway. The other one is a little less obvious or intuitive, which is, we've got hormones that basically travel throughout our body and originates from the gut. So a lot of people don't know that serotonin, which is your feel-good hormone, over 90% of it, I'm sure you've talked about this, over 90% of it is created in the gut. And without the gut creating this hormone, you're not going to get the kind of activity. So not only is serotonin your feel-good hormone, it gives you that vitality, that kind of get up and go. When you're doing your podcast, you need to have that energy. Your serotonin levels are low, it's gonna be difficult for you to do that. But also other hormones like GABA, things that bring you down, things that regulate your mood and your activity, that also is affected. There's something else that's critical to understand with your gut, that the gut wall, right? The gut wall that we have, all of us have, is critically important to your brain health. And why is that? So between the gut and where poop is, let's say here, and blood is just one cell layer thick, and then a couple of mucus layers. That's what prevents stuff that's in your intestine, stool and then those types of things, to go into your blood. So if you don't have an intact gut barrier, we can call that leaky gut. That's the beginning of inflammation. So let's say, I'm not talking about big gaping holes, but small little cracks, right? Where stuff goes into your bloodstream and begins inflammation. That inflammation, when that happens, your body reacts to it. And when it reacts to it, it starts the whole inflammatory cascade. So what that means is that all your white blood cells, all of the things that protect your body become activated. But they're becoming activated to something that's not an infection. That inflammation begins in your gut. They can travel all throughout your body. So people not only have poor brain health when they have gut inflammation, right? But they can have joint health that's bad. We can talk about autoimmune diseases.
Right.
But in the brain, there's a blood-brain barrier. That inflammation can then break the blood-brain barrier. So stuff that's not supposed to be in your brain, inflammatory factors, can go in. So take my dad's example.
Yeah.
When you have a stroke, we now know that if you change your gut health, specifically if you can change what's called the microbiome.
Right.
The microbiome, and I write about in my book, Heal Your Gut, Save Your Brain. The microbiome is a trillion-member army of bacteria, viruses, protozoa that are there. And if you don't have the right mix, Dr. Littleton, you can have bad actors that increase inflammation. You want better microbiome, better environment to be able to change it. So in strokes, if you can actually change the microbiome, and this is again in studies that are not in humans, but in rat models, if you change the microbiome, you can change the outcome. So for example, you take a young mouse and give it the microbiome of an old mouse.
Yeah.
They have a stroke, they often die or debilitated. Conversely, you take a young mouse, right? You take an older mouse rather, and you give it the microbiome of a young mouse, they thrive and they have the same effects of a younger mouse. So the microbiome and the gut health can actually change your performance even after a stroke. So that's just kind of just a glimpse of why I really thought about writing this book. I said, you know what? we have to make a change in not only stroke but Alzheimer's, Parkinson's,
Right.
MS. It's just an epidemic of folks having difficulties with their mental health. And if you can change your gut health, you can change the environment and really make profound changes in your brain.
Now that's the best explanation I've ever heard. I mean, you really nailed it down. You really explained that gut-brain access with that, and you explained the microbiome that anyone can understand that, and that makes perfect sense. Now, I have a lot of questions from that, what you said. How does someone know that their microbiome is healthy? How do we know? Is it just what we feel? Is it more of a clinical diagnosis, or are there tests? How do we know that we have the right components in our gut microbiome?
Yeah, that's a great question, right? So people say, well, I feel good, doc, right? My dad felt pretty good.
Yeah.
I mean, he didn't complain of anything, but yet clearly his microbiome, when you go ask questions deeply, what happens is that, in American medicine, and this is why, your concierge practice is so critical, because you're taking the time to really explore someone's health fully. But general American medicine right now, Western medicine in general, you come in, 5 minutes, you're out. Gastroenterologists are not asking their patients, hey, are you having a little difficulty with brain fog? Are you having some trouble thinking? Do you feel like, boy, I can't get the best mental, activity and the mental performance? GI doctors are not asking that. They're asking you about your symptoms and you're out. Conversely, neurologists aren't asking you questions about this, right? So the first answer to your question is that we have to be a little bit more careful and ask questions about subtle symptoms. Okay. So what are subtle symptoms? Having some of that bloating that you may have, that may not be disabling, but it's happening to you more and more often. Symptoms like changing the way your bowels are moving, changes, even symptoms of heartburn, symptoms of feeling unwell in your gut. Those are the obvious things when your gut health is not optimal. But a lot of us don't feel those symptoms because it's I'll give you the example. It's like walking blindfolded, right?
Right.
Across a road that's leading to a cliff, and you're like, I'm fine. You're walking until you get on that cliff, and then you're falling, and you go, what just happened? So it's a little bit like that. Your body really adjusts and maintains that stability until you actually have a problem, and that's when you have GI symptoms. Short of that, there are tests that are not always, people don't know about. There's the one I like the best is Viome. Maybe your audience has heard of it. It's a Viome test to check your microbiome, and what it does is it can tell you, hey, you know what, you are missing this type of bacteria or this type of organism, and maybe for you, Dr. Littleton, Brussels sprouts may not be the answer. Mm-hmm. It may actually be that you eat less Brussels sprouts and more cabbage, etc. So we're getting to the technology now where we can actually measure our stool. So you take a stool sample and you can measure your microbiome. There are other GI mapping tests that you can do, but for folks who are not independently wealthy, you have to be able to take this approach. Assume that if you're having the SAD diet, which is the standard American diet, that your microbiome is not great. Almost 100% chance not great, because what happens is we're inundated with foods that are processed. The people that are probably listening to your podcast are maybe different, but most people in this country, 95% are eating what? Ultra processed foods, right? Ultra processed foods. So simple carbohydrates, bad fats. We don't talk about that enough, right? To me, having a pepperoni pizza is like an atomic bomb, right? You have bad fats, you have ultra processed foods, you have preservatives, and so what does that do, right? Why is that harmful, and who cares? The reason why is because we're giving our gut stuff that it has never seen before until the last maybe 40 or 50 years, and some even maybe the last 20 years. So it has not had time to adjust to what we're giving it. So for thousands and thousands of years, we ate simple foods, right? Simple carbohydrates that are not present, in these processed foods, but present in nature. And you get also multiple complex carbohydrates in fruits and vegetables, simple meats, and not this processed fats, right? We've changed the way our body is taking in food. And so how does that affect your gut, and how does it affect your microbiome? When you feed your gut certain things, it then gets a certain type of bacteria and virus and protozoa. So let me give you an example. If you're in an environment where you're fostering people that are essentially have bad behaviors, and you continue to give them the bad behaviors, and you're gonna attract that kind of crowd. So if you have bad behaviors, let's say in your city or your community, and you continue to advertise that's what you have, you get bad actors. The same thing happens to your gut. When you give foods that are processed, that are not great for your microbiome, you then attract bad actors. And that bad microbiome, guess what it does? Increases that leakiness in your gut. Guess what it does? Helps you not make the serotonin. Guess what it does? Gives you disordered signals into your brain, so you can't function. I have executives, CEOs that come and see me. They say, "I want to crawl into a ball and sit in my bed because I don't want to do any of these meetings. My head feels like I'm in a vice." And they came to see me for bloating, right?
Wow.
So when you eat these kinds of foods, that then fosters the wrong kind of microbiome and the wrong kind of gut health. Furthermore, right, and I talk about this in my book, the 5 principles of really attaining good gut health. Number 1 is living a purpose-driven life, which is what you're doing with these podcasts, talking to people about living a purpose-driven life. The second I talked about is food and food intake, but less obvious is movement with purpose. Community and spirituality. When you have these 5 principles of purpose-driven living, right? The right nutritional intake, the right movement with purpose, community and spirituality, guess what? You develop the right gut health. Why? Because when you have community, when you have spirituality, when you have movement, you decrease the unrest, right? You decrease that cortisol that's unopposed. That cortisol inflammation, we know from multiple studies, have shown that you develop the wrong set of microbiome, the wrong set of features that can make your gut health poor. And so when you don't have those principles, you change your microbiome, you change your gut health, and you change your brain health. When you look at studies with Alzheimer's, for example, you're seeing something very, very interesting. You're seeing unopposed inflammation in your brain, and you see neurofibrillary tangles that are there. And now in models, we see decades before symptoms of Alzheimer's, you see that inflammation in your gut. With Parkinson's disease, you see something called Lewy bodies. And those Lewy bodies are just basically, clumps of inflammation that's in your certain parts of your brain. Guess what? You can see them in the wall of the gut. The same Lewy bodies are in the wall of the gut, in the nerves of the gut. And so the theory is that you're starting this inflammation in the gut, and it's traversing through the vagus nerve into your brain. It's the gut first hypothesis of Parkinson. So think about the revolution. If we can, not when we're 70 and get diagnosed with Parkinson's or Alzheimer's, right? That's still okay to do it then. I'm not saying you shouldn't change your gut health then. But man, when you're healthy, when you feel nothing is wrong in your 40s and 50s, that's when you say, pow, I'm going to get going. I'm going to use these 5 principles and change my gut health. We can change the future of brain health. And that's the exciting part about it, because when you and I were training medical school, man, they would never tell us about this. It's like, okay, it's reactive medicine. You do this, you do this. Now, what's exciting is that you can prevent these devastating diseases that can change your life. Took my dad's last 10 years of his life. He couldn't play with his grandkids, couldn't do anything. Just a brilliant man that could pass on so much to my kids. Couldn't do it because of the stroke. And I offer to you, and I write about this in the book, Heal Your Gut, Save Your Brain, is that you can change the paradigm, and you can change it starting today.
Well, you brought up several awesome points there, and as you were talking, I wanted to know what your thought was regarding how does things like fasting, specifically intermittent fasting, alcohol, again, when people go through their regular life and they grab and grow, do fast food, how do these things affect your gut biome, and how does it affect your brain health?
That's great questions, right? So and I live in the real world. I get it. I was telling Dr. Littleton, my son had a
and let me throw this in there first. When I say fasting, sometimes people fast because they're on purpose fasting for weight loss, gut health, things like that. But then sometimes people don't have a regimen of eating breakfast in the morning. They just skip meals because they're off to work, or they're just not in a routine of eating breakfast or lunch, and they're eating one meal a day. I mean, how do these things affect what you're talking about?
Right, and so I'll start with, so I was telling Dr. Littleton, my son had a birthday party yesterday, right? So I live in the real world. Did I have a slice of pizza? Heck yes, I did. So I think it's okay if you can 100% avoid processed foods and avoid bad fats, more power to you. But in the real world, some of us have to, I'm in the airport, I've got to do a grab and go. So I think if I use the 80-20 rule, which is 80 to 90% of the time, if I can do what I'm talking about, which is eat whole foods, very simple things, whole foods that you know what the ingredients are, try to make your meals yourself, or at least know that you use as simple ingredients as possible, and not use processed materials. That's a simple rule. Don't add, simple sugars to your meals, and then bad fats. So if I can do that 80 to 90% of the time, I think I'm good. But if you do it once in a while, I think it's okay. I think you still have to be able to not punish yourself, because the other thing is that when you're constantly punishing yourself, you increase your cortisol and you increase inflammation. That is bad for your gut. And then you asked a very good question, because lots of my patients say, what about intermittent fasting, right? So I'm a supporter of intermittent fasting. I'm not a supporter of this prolonged 24, 36 hours that people do. I think that people, they point out to, in ancient times, Dr.
Right.
Nandi, we released these hormones. Well, in ancient times, we didn't do this as some kind of a fad. We did this because there wasn't any food around.
Right.
It's not like some miracle. Because when you don't have food for prolonged periods of time, what also happens is that your stress hormones increase, because you then are in a state of basically deprivation. However, if you're doing, and I often do this, if you're doing, let's say a 14, 16 hour fast, and what I mean by that is you eat dinner at 6 o'clock, you don't eat, the rest of the evening, and then perhaps you skip breakfast and you eat, a meal at 12 o'clock the next day for lunch. So then you've got 12 plus 6, almost got 18 hours. I think that does not, as long as you maintain hydration, I think that's beneficial. We now know that you've seen studies. Now, they're not in human guts, but you see them in animal studies, that you can have reduced inflammation. You can actually have, increased diversity, right? Diversity of your microbiome. So I think doing intermittent fasting up to 16, 18 hours, I think it's okay. But once you start going 24 and 36, and just, a lot of people are doing this because of weight loss, right?
Right, exactly.
And I think that weight loss as a consequence of good health is great. But weight loss in and of itself, to make sure you fit in that bikini because you want to look good on Instagram, is not helpful to your digestive tract, because there are several unhealthy ways of losing weight that'll kill your microbiome, right? Mm-hmm. So if you deprive your body of good nutrients, because you can eat bad foods, small amounts, and still have weight loss, but you're pretty on the outside, but you ain't pretty on the inside, and that's the problem, right? And your last question, I think you said, was alcohol,
right?
So I think, I'm not a drinker at all, and I think that there's now evidence to show even one drink can be harmful, not directly to your gut health, but it can be toxic to the organs that detoxify this, right? So the liver, and the liver, is very much related to your gut and your gut health. So I think if you can avoid it, please do. But in the Western world, it's difficult for people to do that. If you're able to completely stop, do. But otherwise, I would not do more than, for a man, I would not do more than 2 drinks. And the recommendations a day, I would say 2 drinks every 2 to 3 days, and for women 1 drink every 2 to 3 days. If you can avoid it, completely stop it. I just don't think it's very helpful for you. I just think it's a cultural thing. We've developed every celebration in our communities associated with alcohol. I don't think it needs to be. You got billions of people outside the U.S. and the Western world that do fine without it. So I personally think if you can, let's avoid it completely. If not, in absolute moderation, if at all possible. So.
Yeah, no, I thank you for answering those questions, because you brought up a great point. I encounter that question a lot about, I'm going to go back to the fasting one, the intermittent fasting. And what I have found that the people who have made it a lifestyle, who have fasted, half a day, day and a half, up to 3 days, they're people that they've been doing this for a while. And I'm not advocating that. I'm just saying that there are people who will see that type of testimony and say, you know what, I'm going on a 3-day fast. And I'm just like, don't do that. You've never practiced that. And, you're going to become hypoglycemic, end up in a hypoglycemic coma. You're going to be in the ER, and, don't do it. But a lot of times people do it for weight loss, or they think that they're going to beeline to curing themselves like within 24 hours of whatever ailment that they're going through. And in my practice, I preach that it's a process. When you're managing disease, overcoming issues, it's not this, it's over in a week. And so I caution people a lot of times when they hear testimonies like that, because I don't want them to hurt themselves. And that's why I wanted to ask you, how does that affect the gut biome? Because, everything that you're saying makes sense about, look, we have to treat our gut right. It takes, I love the phrase I saw on your website. So it takes guts to heal our brain, or to save our brain. Well, that makes sense. I get it. Another question that I was wondering that if you would, answer is, so when it comes to, hydration, when it comes to making sure that we're properly hydrated so that our gut stays healthy, do you have recommendations on that? Should we just only be drinking water? What about other juices, fruit juices, things like that?
I think that hydration is critical for your body, because of the fact is that if you don't have hydration, you're not giving the environment, right, to be able to keep the digestion moving. One of the things I didn't talk about is that part of the gut microbiome that is important is that your gut motility has to be stable. And you and I both know, if you have multiple patients in your practice, that if you don't have enough hydration, you get constipated, or you get irregular bowel movements. When you have that change, it changes your the motor complexes within the gut walls, and then going down even further, it changes the cellular environment. When you have the cellular environment that's not optimal, it changes the energy homeostasis and then changes the microbiome. So I think I think your point is incredibly important, that the gut lining relies on water to maintain its mucosal integrity. And if you don't have that, you have leaky gut. And everything I talked about, right, is going to start happening. You're going to have little openings, and then that leaky gut then can increase inflammation, not just for brain health. Man, you're gonna have problems with your joints, the ravage of autoimmune disease, all those. So absolutely. And I just recommend, I think if people can at least drink water, I do 64 ounces. I think fruit juices are okay, but the problem is that lots of people, don't just drink fruit juice. They drink things that have lots of simple sugars. If you truly have juice that's from a fruit, I think it's okay. But I also like to keep the fiber in it if possible, because that then, as you know, the glycemic index then changes, right? So when you increase the fiber in sugars, your glycemic index can go down, which means that your sugar is not spiking.
Right.
When your sugar doesn't spike, then you don't have the insulin that's secreted, and then all that, when the insulin's secreted, that increases the inflammation in your body. It goes back to exactly what we talked about. So I think I stick with, if I can at all, with water. If you have to have some juice, use fruit juice that's real. Make sure you know the source. Try to put as much fiber in that, meaning that keep some of the, I don't love throwing away the pulp. I like to see if we can blend it all together. And I know you're an advocate for that when you've come. Dr. Littleton's been on my show, and he's talked about one of his favorite foods has been blueberries. He blends it in his smoothies. So if you can do that and get your hydration that way as well, but it's super important, at least 64 ounces. I'm not in favor of the getting the 128 and 160 and just go crazy with it, because if you have too much, right, too much water for some folks can lead to problems. There's sodium. So I think in moderation, if you can do 64 ounces, I think if we do 64 ounces, you're better than 95% of the American population, because people do not drink water, don't get hydration. But it's critical for your gut health. It's critical for your microbiome, and then subsequently the rest of your body. We're talking about brain and gut health today, but really optimizing gut health. And we knew this thousands of years ago. We just forgot about it. From the ancient Greeks to the Chinese medicine, to Indian medicine, they all talked about this. You have to start with the gut, and now we're rediscovering that. If you can do one thing to change your gut health, it'll lead to profound changes. It won't be tomorrow, because we're a society that says, hey, I want that right now, and it won't be today, but within 3 to 4 weeks, I've seen my patients dramatically change if you can instill changes in your gut health.
Oh man, that's awesome. That's awesome. Now, I want to end on my meds protocol, and I want people to learn from your life when it comes to the gut-brain axis, as it pertains to how. I said this on your show a long time ago. I talked about move, eat, drink, sleep, and that's something that I always talk to my patients about, because I believe that if they can master moving, eating, drinking, sleeping, they can master their health. And I want to know, how do you move, eat, drink, sleep? And can you talk to us and give us some tips on that?
Yeah, I love that. I'm going to use that more often. I have not been for my patients and some of the interviews they've done. But I'll start with moving. To me, movement with purpose is always more important than just isolating movement. So what do I mean by that? Like last night, I just literally ran with my kids down the street. We play basketball. So what I like to do is incorporate purpose and spirituality with my movement rather than isolating the movement. I think that works for me. And then you said move, eat. To me, eating is critical. I enjoy food, but I think if I could impart one thing, I try to eat fermented foods with every one of my meals, right? So we didn't talk about that today, but fermented foods have those good bugs that we're talking about, the microbiome, right? So, if I like dairy, so I eat yogurt, but if you don't, you can have kimchi, you can have tepache, there's multiple things, kombucha, whatever you want. But I would try to incorporate, I incorporate fermented foods with each of my meals. And then so move, eat, drink. So to me, my kids, if you ever ask them, I always instill in them and say, what's dad's favorite drink? It's always water. I just love water, and I drink it all day long. So I start off in the morning with 32 ounces. I get one of those big Yeti things, before I go. So it's 5:30. I fill it up with, I think it's about 32 ounces. I drink that before I go, and then I spend the rest of my day, because listen, it's busy. You keep forgetting things, right? So I spend the rest of the day having 32 additional, ounces of water. So that's my move, eat, drink, and then sleep.
Yeah, so talk to us about how you sleep.
This is a difficult one for me, right? So because it's like the rest of us, man, if I can get one more productive minute out, I'd be good.
Yeah.
So for me, what I have to do is consciously an hour before I go to bed, and it should be 90 minutes, but I do an hour. I turn off my devices, and I do a little meditation. And so sometimes I do it with my wife, sometimes I do it alone. I do at least 15 minutes, and then it puts me in the mood for sleeping. I don't put TV on, I don't do any electronics, and what it allows me to do, which is nice, is kind of reflect on the day. And as I've done this as a habit, it reflects kind of like I'm somebody who always wants to know, that, hey, these are my wins, this is what I got to work on to be better. And that's what I spend the time doing that. And then gratitude. It's a little different topic, but I'm a huge believer in gratitude and really being understanding the blessings that have been given to me and my family and the planet, and then reflect upon that, and that helps me a lot. So that's how I kind of go through my day, typically.
Man, that people can learn a lot from that. You're phenomenal. I think everything that you said, not only did I learn a lot, but I know people hearing you today, they're going to want to go and grab your book. Everything that you said was like, people don't regularly hear this. doctors don't normally talk about this, and it's so essential. I mean, you made that vividly clear. You guys got to get his book, Heal Your Gut, Save Your Brain. Now, where can people find this? I mean, look, I already know. You can go to Barnes & Noble and find it. I see it on the shelves. I'm sure you can get it on Amazon, but where else can people find you and hear you and learn more about you?
Yeah, if you go, thank you for that, and thank you for the kind words, and I feel the same. You're an incredible gift to the planet, and so I appreciate you doing everything you're doing. But you can go to askdrnandi.com, so ASKDRNANDI.com. You can get more information, everything that we do. But you're right, you can get it from Amazon, Barnes & Noble, any bookstore that, we're around the country, and in most of the world that this book has been published. But, and so I think it'll help you. I think it'll help your family. So yeah, you can pick it up anywhere books are sold, but askdrnandi.com. You can get all the information, and you can pick it up there as well.
And you also have recipe materials. I saw that on your website. People can learn about what they should be eating, how they should be cooking, right?
Yeah, I love food. My wife and I love to cook. And I think the reason I like to cook so much is because not just the food, it brings people together, and so we try to share some of those recipes in the book and in our website. Our kids make these meals, and then they I haven't told you, Jason, but they have their own YouTube site, and they actually cook, and they do those things as well. So to me, cooking is a communal thing, and I think more people do it. I think you can share not only good nutrition, but community and spirituality, which also helps your health.
And we got to follow you on social media as well. Your Facebook, your Instagram, all of that. You got to follow this guy if you want to learn more about your gut health and eating right. Again, I just want to thank you for coming on the podcast. I think people are going to have a very valuable experience listening to you. I mean, I've learned so much just in this conversation that I'm going to make some changes, But I just want to thank you for coming on. I got to have you on again. Go get his book. All right. Heal Your Gut, Save Your Brain. Thank you so much, Partha, for being on.
Thank you for having me, Jason. I appreciate it. And I'll be happy to come on any other time and tell.
I'm happy. I got to have you back. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's just so much to ask on that. I mean, I feel like I could have spoken to you for 2 hours here, I mean, so many things, but I want people to digest this. You said so much. It was clear. Again, this was awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
All right, you guys, listen, like I said, get his book, and this podcast, you want to share it with your friends, because so many people need to know how to overcome brain fog, how to eat, anti-inflammatory, how to eat correctly so that they can have a better cognitive life, better cognitive health. And not just that, they could just feel better. Everything that he said, you got to get his book, follow him online. Again, I can't wait to see you next time on the Concierge Doc Podcast. Thank you so much.